You say you're tired. But it's not just your body that's exhausted. It's your soul, weighed down by something invisible yet crushing. You try to stay strong. You smile in public. You function. You survive. But behind your eyes, there's a storm no one sees. You're not broken. You're not cursed. You're afraid. And fear is clever. It wears 1,000 masks: logic, laziness, self-doubt, even kindness. It doesn't scream to be heard. It whispers quietly. Don't go there. Don't speak up. Don't try. Don't feel. And most of all, don't change. Because change means risk. And risk means pain. And your mind has been trained, since you were a child, to avoid pain at all costs. So you build your world small. You limit your voice. You doubt your worth. Not because you're weak, but because your mind is following its oldest program. Survive. Stay safe. Stay hidden. But what if I told you, this fear, it's not protecting you. It's imprisoning you. You're living in a mental cage with no visible bars. And every time you silence yourself, you reinforce the lock. The tragedy isn't that fear exists. The tragedy is that you believed it. You've obeyed it. You've let it define you. But today we go deeper, into the roots, into the shadows, to finally ask the question your mind fears most. What would your life look like if you stopped being afraid? Fear didn't begin with your adult failures. It didn't start with a lost job, a broken heart, a shattered dream. It began long before that. It started in a room you barely remember, a moment when you were too small to understand, too helpless to defend yourself. Maybe it was a raised voice, a cold stare, a slammed door, a punishment for simply being yourself. And in that moment, your nervous system made a decision. The world is not safe, and neither am I. You learned to shrink, not because you wanted to, but because your survival depended on it. As a child, love is oxygen, and anything that threatens love feels like death. So if they withdrew affection, you learned to perform. If they criticized you, you learned to hide. If they abandoned you, you learned to never trust. These weren't conscious choices. They were protective instincts. Fear was your shield. But over time, the shield became your skin. You forgot it was even there. You called it caution. You called it wisdom. You called it just who I am. But the truth? You are still that child, protecting yourself from ghosts. Fear, once a reflex, became a lifestyle. You began choosing safety over truth, silence over authenticity, pleasing others over honoring yourself. You didn't choose fear. It was given to you by voices you trusted, by systems that failed you, by pain too deep for words. And now, that old fear, the one that began in silence, still speaks for you, unless you finally choose to listen and speak back. Fear is not just an emotion. It's a virus, a mind virus, invisible, silent, and deeply contagious. It doesn't need logic to spread. It just needs repetition. A single fear, repeated often enough, becomes truth. You've heard it your whole life. Be careful. Don't speak out. Don't fail. And without realizing it, your brain starts building patterns. Avoid this. Control that. Don't go there. It rewires your thoughts. It infects your goals. It rewrites your identity. Until one day, you're no longer living. You're managing anxiety, managing people's opinions, managing a version of yourself that's small enough to feel safe. But fear doesn't stop there. It multiplies. What begins as fear of rejection becomes fear of love, fear of failure becomes fear of success, fear of the past becomes fear of the future. And every decision, from what you say to what you dream, gets filtered through the same question: what if something goes wrong? But here's the dark truth. Fear doesn't protect you. It prevents you. It doesn't keep pain away. It keeps growth away. Because the price of staying safe is everything that could have been. And like a virus, fear doesn't just live in your mind. It infects your relationships, your career, your self-worth. It disguises itself as intelligence, as caution, as control. But Really, it's just an old survival code, running without your permission. The question is, how long will you let it run your life? You say you want freedom. You say you want to grow, to heal, to rise. But every time you try, something pulls you back. That's not weakness. It's a loop, a cycle created by your own mind, a loop called false safety. False safety is the voice that says, don't risk it, don't say it, don't go for it. Because if you do, you might get hurt again. And your nervous system, still wired from the past, would rather keep you stuck than let you be wounded. So instead of taking the leap, you procrastinate, you overthink, you create chaos. Not because you want to fail, but because failure is familiar. Pain is predictable. And deep inside, predictability feels safer than possibility. This is how fear tricks you. It gives you comfort in exchange for freedom. It offers numbness instead of joy. It says, at least here, you know what to expect. You stay in bad relationships, not because you love them, but because leaving feels terrifying. You keep the same job, not because it fulfills you, but because the unknown feels like death. That's the false safety loop. You aren't protecting yourself. You're replaying your trauma, disguised as logic. The scariest part? Your brain rewards this loop. Each time you avoid risk, it says, good job, you stayed alive. But survival is not the same as living. Until you break this loop, you'll keep mistaking the prison for peace and your fear for wisdom. Control is seductive. It makes you feel powerful. Like if you just plan everything, fix everything, stay ahead of every problem. Nothing can hurt you. But that's the illusion. The mind says, if I can control people, I won't be abandoned. If I can control outcomes, I won't feel pain. If I can control myself, maybe I'll finally be enough. But deep inside that need for control lies terror, not strength, but a fear so old. It doesn't speak in words. It just grips your chest in silence. Control is a reaction to chaos you couldn't stop, to wounds you couldn't explain, to moments you didn't choose, but that still shaped you. And so now you control your emotions, your relationships, even your dreams. You shrink your wants so no one can disappoint you. You silence your truth so no one can reject you. You don't ask for love, you perform for it. But here's the lie. Control doesn't protect you from pain. It just protects you from life. Because when you live in fear of what might go wrong, you miss everything that could go right. Real freedom isn't in controlling the world. It's in trusting yourself to survive it. You're not weak because you lost control. You're human. And the truth, you never really had control. Only the fear of what would happen if you let go. But sometimes letting go is the bravest thing your mind can do. There's a voice in your head. You know the one. It doesn't yell, but it never stops whispering. You're not enough. You'll mess this up. Why even try? It sounds like you, but it's not you. It's your inner critic, a shadow that was born when you were too young to defend yourself. Maybe it took the voice of a parent, or a teacher, or a moment when you failed and someone made sure you remembered. That voice crawled into your mind and made a home in the quietest corners. It grew roots, and now it speaks before you even realize. Before you apply for the job, it says, you're not qualified. Before you express your feelings, it says, they'll laugh at you. Before you try something new, it says, don't embarrass yourself. But here's the terrifying part. You believe it because it doesn't scream. It sounds like logic, like realism, like just being honest. But that's the trap. You're not being honest with yourself. You're repeating an old insult you mistook for identity. The inner critic is not your conscience. It's your jailer. And every time you listen to it, you lock yourself back in the same emotional prison. But what if that voice isn't telling the truth? What if it's just an echo of someone else's fear? Still playing in your head? It's time to question the voice. To ask, who taught me this? And why do I still believe them? You say you want to move forward. You dream of change, a better life, a healed mind, a sense of peace. But you don't move You stay stuck, frozen in the same job, the same toxic relationships, the same late-night thoughts that steal your sleep. Why? Because you're emotionally paralyzed. It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's survival. Your nervous system was trained long ago to shut down when life became too overwhelming. When feelings were too big to feel, you disconnected. When pain came too often, you built walls. And now, as an adult, those same defenses remain. They whisper, stay still, stay small, stay safe. You're not avoiding life because you don't care. You're avoiding it because your body remembers what your mind tries to forget. That time you cried and no one came. That time you hoped and were crushed. That time you trusted and were betrayed. Your system learned emotion equals danger. So it numbed everything, even joy. And now, every time you get close to healing, you freeze, you run, you sabotage. This is emotional paralysis. It convinces you that staying still is peace, but it's just a silence full of pain. Healing starts when you realize the freeze response isn't you giving up. It's you trying to survive with no map out. But now you have a map. Now you know the name of the trap. And naming it is the first key to escaping it. Stand in front of a mirror. Really look, not at your hair, not at your smile, but beneath all of it. Look into your own eyes and ask, who are you really? And more importantly, who are you pretending to be? Most people avoid this test. They live entire lives behind masks. Smiling masks, strong masks, achiever masks. But inside, there's a version of you that's still hiding, still waiting for someone to finally say, you're allowed to be seen. The mirror doesn't lie. It reflects back everything, even the truths you buried. You see the fear, the guilt, the unhealed pain you've carried since childhood. You see the person you could have been if shame hadn't shackled your choices. And it hurts. But the mirror isn't the enemy. It's the moment of awakening. Because for the first time, you're not running. You're facing it. The version of you that gave up. The version that betrayed their own dreams to keep others happy. The version that never felt worthy and kept proving it by shrinking. But here's the twist. You can't change what you won't confront. So this is your mirror test. No filters. No edits. Just brutal truth. Will you finally look? Will you finally see? Because the only thing scarier than facing your true self is living your whole life as a stranger to it. You weren't born with shame. You weren't born afraid to speak. You didn't come into this world doubting your worth. Someone or something taught you to feel that way. And now, it's time to unlearn it. Your mind has been running a program. Lines of emotional code written in pain. Installed by people who didn't even know they were writing it. Don't be too loud. Don't cry. Be good or else. The program became habits. The habits became your identity. And your identity became your prison. But every program has a flaw. It only runs as long as you let it. Reclaiming your power doesn't happen overnight. It starts with small rebellions. You pause before reacting. You question the voice in your head. You say no, even when it terrifies you. You ask, is this belief really mine or was it planted? Bit by bit, you override the system. You stop waiting for permission. You stop asking the world to validate your existence. And for the first time, you begin writing new code. One that says, I am enough. I am allowed to heal. I choose to live my life, not the one fear designed for me. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to remember who you were before the world convinced you to forget. The program is strong, but you are stronger. And now, the door is open. Will you step through? You search for freedom. In books, in people, in temporary escapes. But no matter how far you run, you always return to the same silent war. The war inside your mind. You are not your pain, but your pain is trying to speak. And for years, you've silenced it with distractions, with pretending, with survival. But now, there's no more pretending. Look at yourself, not as broken, but as someone who has survived what should have destroyed them. Someone who walked through emotional fires, and came out carrying scars, not shame. Every pattern, every sabotage was your mind trying to protect you, even if it hurt, even if it made you feel small. It was survival, not failure. But survival is not the same as living. If you want peace, you must confront the part of your mind that still thinks love must be earned, that success means exhaustion, that happiness isn't safe. You must look into the shadow and tell it, I see you, but you don't control me anymore. Healing isn't light and flowers. It's raw, bloody, messy. It's facing the version of you that you buried and saying, you deserve better. And then it's choosing to give yourself better. The prison was never real. The door was never locked. The only thing you needed was the courage to look within. And now you have it.